I've always wanted to try one of iFi's nano iDSD DACs and headphone amps. And now that iFi is going to be moving on from the Black Label series, they've released this iDSD signature, which they've sent me for review. So I'm going to take you through what it does and what it can do, and how I thought it sounded with a variety of headphones and in-ear monitors. To start with, let's take a look at the actual device itself, its inputs, outputs, and features, because there's quite a bit. So it's a pretty big unit. I mean, it's fairly chunky. It sits nicely on a desk. If you compare it to something like the Cord Mojo, even if you've got the Poly, is quite a bit smaller. And well, let's just have a look at a portable player such as this HiBR6 I reviewed recently. That's kind of sits nicely on top. It's a bit wider, but still it's about the same, with the case on, it's about almost the same kind of thickness. So still it makes the iDSD signature a pretty chunky unit. So it's more in the kind of transportable category than anything. And speaking of, well, let's have a look at the outputs. One of the unique new things about the iDSD signature is that it now has a 4.4mm Pentacon output. And this is the kind of future of headphone connectors, you could call it. It allows, doesn't matter whether the circuit inside is single-ended or balanced, it will work with, it just has the 5 connectors necessary for a correct balanced connection if necessary, and again, works fine single-ended. But you have your usual 6.3mm or quarter-inch port here for full-sized headphones, and there's an adapter in the box for 3.5 if necessary. So, but the inclusion, I just want to note, the inclusion of a 4.4mm port does not mean that the circuit inside is balanced. This is still single-ended internally, but it does allow future compatibility, and I think this combination is a good one going forward. Either 4.4 with the 6.3 or 4.4 with 3.5mm should be the future, I reckon, of all headphone-based amplification. So, the other output on there is a good old pair of RCA ports. And so you can hook this up like as a DAC to another headphone amplifier or another device of choice, which will act as a DAC, and I did that as well, which I'll talk about in the sound impressions. Of the inputs, well, you have a SPDIF input. This can be either coaxial, digital, or optical, so you can use a mini Toslink cable, or you can use an SPDIF cable. Now, if you need an adapter for that, well, if you get one of these adapters, such as this Sony RCA to 3.5mm TS plug, you just plug that in thus, and there's your standard kind of RCA coax digital input. And the other input, this is where things get a little bit interesting, is the USB input. Now, USB input, if you have not seen any iFi products before, you're probably wondering, why are they using a full-size USB-A plug, not socket, plug? And you think that is the wackiest thing you've ever seen. Well, actually, it makes a lot of sense when you realize how this was originally designed to be hooked up. Or I should say the iFi products in general designed to be hooked up. They were designed to be used, say, with a camera connection kit for an iPhone, or this is the USB-C equivalent, because I'm using my camera connection kit to make this video. And, it has you go from your phone or whatever on one end, or your computer, I should say, to a full-size USB a socket. So it's an adapter to give you a full-size USB-A socket on a phone or a computer or tablet which only has USB-C, or in the case of iPhones, a lightning connector. So all you do is you just take it and then you plug it in thus, and there you just stack your phone on top, or your DAP as we had before, and plug in, and there you have an audio stack, an old school audio stack almost. And so then the question comes, what happens if you want to hook it up to a computer? You think, oh, that's very odd. How do you do that? Well, in the box they have a whole bunch of accessories here, which we'll get out. A nice pad for putting on top so you don't scratch your phone by stacking it, and a whole bunch of cables and adapters and accessories, which answer all your questions in a pretty quick manner. This is a USB 3 extension cable. You get the idea now? You just use this to hook up to your computer. Now, this isn't a USB 3 device. They've chosen a USB 3 cable because it is, for the higher transmission speeds, better shielded and better made, but still cheap. So then you just plug that in thus, and plug that into your computer on the other end. Now, if you still want to use, of course, and some other regular USB cable, they have a regular kind of adapter for that, and like a USB, like a cable joiner, and you just plug that in, and there's your regular USB-B socket if you want to use with some fancy USB cable or a longer one or whatever. Now, charging doesn't happen via that socket. Charging happens via this USB-C socket on the side, and it can you can plug it in and stay charged continuously. And then for that end, you just have, if you want to use it, like say with a nearby computer, you can just use a short USB-C cable, which they've included, and plug that into your laptop or whatever, and it will charge. Although it is pretty short, I wonder why they didn't include a longer one. But since longer ones are readily available, I don't think it's a big issue. And you have a nice fancy 3.5mm adapter for the front, which once you look at it, it doesn't actually stick out that much more than you'd expect. But again, this is kind of more transportable than portable. And if you do have a Toslink cable and you need an adapter, well, they included a little adapter there for mini optical to use as the input. So that's basically the overview of the inputs and outputs. And well, if we look on the bottom, this is where we get into the features and functionality. And rather like those people who have modified their cars and stuck stickers of every component manufacturer on their rear windows, and they can't even see out for the number of stuff they've added, iFi have done much the same and badged the crap out of their DSD signature with every little bit of component feature and whatever that they have in there. But the relevant ones are kind of written in white text here, such as the power mode, which is a fancy name for the gain system, more or less. Well, actually, it is a power mode, I suppose, because you have Echo, Normal, and Turbo, and they correspond to more power for bigger headphones, and less power for in-ear monitors, and less power means longer battery life. So your long listening sessions with IEMs are readily possible, and if you're home and plugged into a computer, you can break out the full-sized headphones, and you'll get plenty of power there. Now, the digital filter is something that with the stock firmware, which is 5.3c, will have zero effect. If you downgrade the firmware, which you can download from iFi's site to, say, 5.2, I think it's 5.2 or 5.2c, I forget, you lose the MQA functionality, but you do get the ability to switch between non-oversampling, a minimum phase filter, and something, it's either a brick wall or a linear phase filter, and that will allow... You can switch between those, but if you're in the stock firmware, it has no effect. It just uses iFi's GTO filter, whichever switch position that's in. The IEM match is a more relevant one, and this allows very sensitive IEMs to reduce hiss. So set it off, the output impedance is below 1 ohm. But the problem with having below 1 ohm output impedance is that hiss with very sensitive IEMs can be louder. So you can switch this up to a high sensitivity or ultra sensitivity, and it will increase the output impedance to 2.5 ohms or so, and reduce the output so that you don't get as much hiss, or reduce hiss very considerably. But the only problem I've had with this was I forget to turn it off, and then I put it in turbo mode and wonder why the sound was all distorted, and then I forgot to turn the IEM match off. I thought maybe the battery had gone bad or something had gone bad, but no, I'd accidentally left the IEM match on. So a bit of a caution note there. The two other features which of course are relevant, if you're an iFi owning person, you'll already know about these. If not, the extra bass, which of course boosts the bass up, which is nice with fairly neutral-ish sounding headphones to give it gives a bit of a bump. I forgot how many decibels, it's something like about 3 dB, but enough to be comfortably boosted but not overblown, which is nice. And the 3D mode, which I don't know if this actually does anything really 3D wise. It seems to just increase the treble, a treble increase makes the sound, well, more openish. Well, that's the impression. So you can actually make it kind of very old school V-shaped by putting both of those on. But they're kind of nice things to have if you do want to kind of tweak the sound of the headphones you have. If they're a bit too dark, like some headphones are, you can make it more or less sound more brighter and thus more open. And if you have some more flattish sounding headphones, then you can just hit in the extra bass for a bit of a bass boost without overdoing it. Other than that, you have functionality. You turn the switch on, which includes the volume control, and you have this light that indicates which what's happening at the moment. In this case, it should be flashing green because there's nothing connected at all. And it will indicate different colors depending on the sample rate of the music, whether it's high res or not. And then you have the volume control. The only downside to this volume control is that you get bad channel imbalance until you get up to about 10 o'clock. But with the other ability to adjust the gain, say if it's too loud somewhere around there, you can always just switch it down a mode, and then you can run the volume control up to where it just doesn't have any channel imbalance. Though a couple of people have received these with like really bad volume controls. I think it was not a good idea to include the power switch in the volume control. Separate would have been a good idea, because then you can get you avoid this problem with bad volume pots, which the combination seems to have an issue with. So that's kind of the overview. And now you're probably wondering, well, what are my impressions of how it sounded when listening with music? And so let's get on with that. I listened to both in-ear monitors and full-sized headphones with the iDSD signature. Now, if you want the too long didn't read version, it's very warm and engaging and very kind of just pleasant to listen with, whether you are using in-ear monitors or full-sized headphones. It just had that factor of just making listening generally enjoyable, kind of warm, punchy, really kind of, especially in the bass, that was very noticeable. And the power output was most noticeable with things like these planar headphones, Mesoamperians, and similar like the Final D8000 Pro, Focal Utopias, and that kind of thing, high-end headphones, where that kind of warmer, punchier bass sound really made it kind of satisfying, as even as a desktop amp would. Now, in that, well, onto the in-ear monitors, I do my usual test with the Campfire Audio Andrometers, because they're very sensitive in-ear monitors. Now, of course, iFi gear is geared towards sensitive in-ear monitors with the IEM match settings. The only problem I had with that is that when I did engage it, I did seem to lose a little bit of bass from the Andrometers, which wasn't always kind of the best. And that was kind of, especially, it was actually the middle position I seemed to lose the most, and maybe a bit less so in the ultra sensitivity position, which is kind of odd, but well, that was the way things were. And I guess it may be the factor of increasing the output impedance slightly that you do get a slight drop in the bass, because the impedance of the Andrometers isn't even throughout the frequency range. It does change, so that can, especially if you have something with a slightly higher than zero output impedance, you can get a bit of a frequency response change, and you do tend to lose some bass in that. So that was the kind of only kind of maybe negative thing, and you do seem to lose a little bit of punch in the bass having it in less than turbo mode with full-sized headphones. So there's a bit of variance in there in how it did perform, depending on the kind of setup you did have here with either the power mode or the IEM match. But all the same, still, I mean, it didn't really lose its character of just being enjoyable and good to listen with. Maybe some more fine details came out when I compared it to other devices. Now, in the past, I have reviewed the XDSD, and this was one of the devices I really liked. It's a competitor to the Mojo. I've reviewed it before. Unlike, it has the 3D mode and the extra bass, and it has Bluetooth as well. So it kind of was supposed to be the future of the Nano series for iFi, although I don't know where iFi is going with that. And of course, it's about half the size, and it's a bit less thick, and well, about the size of, well, a Mojo, or slightly bigger maybe because of the Bluetooth. And in that, so to recap, if you haven't seen my review of the XDSD, I found it very slightly behind sonically than the Mojo. I mean, it's kind of hard to compete with the really high tech and the advanced technology that's in here, unique technology. But all the same, this is made down to a price as well, and it does a really good job. And in that, I kind of found that the sound quality of the iDSD signature was kind of more comparable to the XDSD. And maybe, it was kind of, apples and oranges versus this and the Mojo, for example, in that maybe the Mojo had a slight bit more clarity. It kind of I felt like I was feeling, the precision and detail of the sound came out a bit better with the Mojo. That's whether with full-sized headphones or in-ear monitors, and a little bit more precise without losing kind of a little bit of warmth. Whereas the XDSD signature had kind of more punch in the bass and kind of more engagement in that way. So I couldn't say that one is necessarily better than the other, although maybe technically the Mojo is better. I found that both were really nice to listen with, and the advantage of the iDSD signature, of course, and of course things like the XDSD, is that you can switch on the extra bass and 3D mode if you desire. So it's kind of more of a choice of maybe more technically compromised but kind of more engaging sound, whereas you kind of slightly more precise and accurate sound, but engaging because of that. So it was kind of a little, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in there. But both were eclipsed by something like the setup I have on my desk, which I'm preparing for review, the Shit Audio Jotunheim, and that hooked up into things like the Bifrost or the Yggdrasil. Well and truly eclipsed both of these as far as desktop rigs go. But again, they're kind of different setups. And it was also the same, much the same using them as a DAC to something like a headphone amp. It was much the same kind of difference. You had this was actually very engaging as a DAC to I just, for example, plugged it into a Master 9 headphone amp. Really, really nice DAC. And again, that kind of engaging sound came out that the iFi DACs are really known for. And it was a bit of a difference kind of to the Mojo, which again had the slightly more maybe technically accurate and precise sound, but maybe in some respect a touch less engagement. So it's kind of, yeah, different kind of character. And of course the advantage you get over, a DAP again is you have powerful full-sized headphones that you normally wouldn't out of a DAP that seem to, where most DAPs at, this kind of price range, like the around $649 they're asking, are going to kind of run out of steam if you do turn the volume up, with a pair of headphones like these. So as things go, I really like the iDSD signature, and I really nice to have a chance on iFi's kind of last black label, or this would maybe you might call it a blue label given the case. And now I really understand why the iFi products are really so popular with people, because it was just really enjoyable to listen with. And it's the kind of device I might, if I was the kind of person who had to go to an office and park something on my desk with a pair of headphones, this would be high on my list of things I might consider to take with me. So that was kind of my impressions of iFi's iDSD signature. As always, before you go, don't forget that these videos are supported by people such as yourself. And if you'd like to become a supporter, if you'd like my buying advice, you'd like help, setting up a system and don't want to make mistakes, and, my advice could save you a lot more money than the little bit I'm asking you to help out in helping me make these videos. So if you do have any questions, comments, or criticism, do consider becoming a supporter. And you can actually influence how these videos are made and get to see a lot of stuff behind the scenes and get a lot of extra information as well. So, as always, thanks once again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you online.